Alright, today we are going to do our still life project. You're going to follow along with these directions. First of all, you're going to go into Photoshop and you're going to open up your raw file. So you're going to look for your still life images, locate your raw file, not the JPEG. Okay, the raw file is a CR2 file. If you look at this image that it's right next to this JPEG 2817, you will see that we have here a CR2 file. So you're going to open that up. And the first thing we are going to do is we are going to raw process this. Okay, so to raw process this, we're going to make it image adjustments following our directions. Step 1 is to raw process this. We're going to adjust the temperature, make this a little warmer to bring out our highlights, and we could go to the left, which would make it a little more green tint, or to the right, which will make it a little more red tint, which I think I prefer. We're going to check our exposure. We can make this a little lighter or a little darker, but I think our exposure is okay. So we're going to keep it pretty much where we had it. We can adjust our contrast if we want to give it a little more contrast. We can adjust the highlights or the shadows or the whites or the blacks. I might make this a little blacker, add a little more black to the left, and I'm going to add some clarity, not too much, maybe plus 20, add a little more vibrance and a little more saturation, but you do not want to overdo it or it's going to have issues. Once you have raw processed your image using the default functions that come up, you may want to go and sharpen your image. So you're going to want to click on this little tree icon, this kind of like little detailed triangle shaped icon. You can add a little bit of sharpening, and if we zoom in by going Control Plus, we can check to see if we caused any noise damage, and it doesn't look like we did, so that's good. Once you've done this, click on Open Image. The next step from here is to crop our image so that we can print this as an 8x10. So if your image is a vertical image, you will use the vertical settings. If it's a horizontal image, you will use the horizontal settings for the cropping tool. So first we have to click on the crop tool, and we need to make sure we have selected width, height, and resolution. We're going to put a width, this is a vertical image, so we're going to put a width of 8 and a height of 10. Actually, yes, that's correct. And then a resolution of 300. Okay, so we have a width of 8, a height of 10, and a resolution of 300. Now you can see that a little bit of the top and a little bit of the bottom is being cropped. I'm going to bring it in even a little tighter and bring it down just a tad. So now I'm going to click on our little check box here, and it's now going to be cropped for our 8x10. Our next step is we need to duplicate our background. And we're going to call this working image. We're going to say OK. Okay, so now on our working image, we're going to do our retouching. This is going to be all our retouching. I'm going to zoom in on my image a little bit. And I'm going to make sure that my navigator is open. And it is. It has a little check mark next to navigator, because this will let me move around my image. I'm going to zoom in even closer. I'm going to look here at the left corner where I need to do some retouching. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use my clone stamping tool, and I'm going to set the opacity on my clone stamping tool at 30% so that I make more gradual changes. Now I want to get rid of some of this dust spots I see on the cloth. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key, I'm going to left click, and I'm going to remove these dust spots. Now it's very important that I do not create a cloning pattern. I'm going to move over here to the center, and I'm going to get rid of this little mark that's in between the bow and all of my dust spots. Now, what do I mean by cloning pattern? A cloning pattern is a repeat of a design. So for example, if I were to clone this little white dot here, I could make an exact pattern of it, right? Well, we don't want to do that. So when we clone, we want to move our clone stamping tool around a lot. So as to not create a repeated design or a repeated cloning pattern. I need to get in a little bit closer to that, so I'm going to make my brush just a tad bit smaller so I can get in closer. Now there's a bunch of little wrinkles in the fabric, and I may want to get rid of those wrinkles, but I'm going to use another tool. I'm going to come in and get rid of all these little white specks on the uniform. Maybe not everything, but quite a bunch of the ones that really stand out. So I got rid of all the lint that was on the fabric on the bottom, and I'm moving up now and looking at the background. This background has some stuff I want to remove, like little white specks. So let's remove those. And I see a piece of lint here that I want to get rid of. So let's get rid of that. So I'm taking from the same color of gray to get rid of that lint and to get rid of any little white specks. Now there's a bunch of wrinkles in this fabric, and some of this fabric wrinkle is going to disappear when we blur out the background, but some of it may not. So I recommend you remove some of these darker, more intense wrinkles. And I'm going to show you this new tool. Let's start here at the left bottom. We're going to come over here and we're going to go to Edit, Fill, and we're going to change this to Content Aware. Alright, but first we need to select what we want. So I'm going to use my little lasso tool to select a wrinkle, just a little small wrinkle right here that I want to remove. Now I'm going to go up to Edit, Fill, and I want to choose Content Aware, and I'm going to say OK. And what that did is it smoothed in. We go Control plus and look at that a little closer. It smoothed in that wrinkle. So let's come over here and do this wrinkle that's to the right of it. I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, Content Aware, OK, and you see how it kind of filled in that wrinkle. I'm going to back out a little bit. Okay, so we can do that maybe back here as well. Just select that, Edit, Fill, and Content Aware, and we can start to smooth out some of those maybe more annoying little wrinkles that we want to remove from the fabric. I'm going to do the same thing like right here. Edit, Fill, Content Aware, and it kind of fills that in with some of the fabric around. Alright. Okay, why won't it? There we go. Edit, Fill, and Content Aware. Okay. Edit, Fill, Content Aware. Alright. So let's back out a little bit and let's turn off our working image and we can see what it looked like originally. So there's the original image and there's the retouching work that we did. Now I'm thinking right here I want to get rid of that, so I'm just going to draw a little lasso around that. Edit, fill, content aware, okay. And then maybe here as well. Okay, so let's look at that. So there's before and after. So the fabric is looking a little smoother here at the front. And that's kind of important because we're not going to really be blurring this area out very much, so we want that area to be as retouched as possible. I'm also going to circle this little area back there. Let's see if I can smooth that out okay. Looks pretty good. Oops. Had to take a little break there, coming back to my image. Okay, so now I want to look at the jersey a little closer to see if there's any retouching that needs to be done on the jersey. I see quite a bit of little white specks. So I'm gonna maybe up my opacity just a little more, maybe to like 50% so that it just goes a little faster, but at the same time I have control. And I'm just gonna fill in some of that. Get rid of some of those white little specks on the jersey jacket here. I really don't like this tag here at all, so I'm thinking I'm going to clone kind of a bigger area. I'm going to actually take this little rectangular marquee tool and I'm going to kind of create like a little square of that, and I'm going to go edit, copy, edit, paste, and now I'm going to take that shape that's now layer 1 and I'm going to move it over, and I'm actually going to stretch it out a little bit and enter, and then I'm going to tilt it a little bit and I'm going to fill in that space and completely get rid of that tag there. However, I may need to retouch the edges, but we'll do that a little bit later. So let's back out mine. Okay, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty natural actually. So I'm going to go back to my working image and I'm going to continue to retouch any little white specks I see on this jersey. Now some of these directions that I'm doing here actually are not on the directions on the actual paper. I like adding that little square here to cover the tag. That was just like a choice I just made to do for this particular image. May not be a choice you would make for every image, but it was a choice I wanted to make for that particular image. Now this very glowy piece here, I'm thinking I might clone some of the and bring this down a little bit and just fill that in just to kind of cover up that, because it was pretty bright. And let's go ahead and let's look at what we did so far. So this is what we've done so far. That's the before and after. So it's definitely looking, so that's before and after. So it's definitely looking a lot cleaner. We still got some work to do back here on the background fabric. I'm going to get rid of this, but I'm going to clone this out. I'm not going to use my my fill quite yet. I'm just going to kind of soften these wrinkles back here a little bit. So let's turn that off. There we go. We can see we've removed some of those harsh wrinkles back there a little bit. Going to remove that, remove this. I don't know if I just like what I just did, so I'm going to undo that. Now it's really important that you don't overdo it, that you try to make this look as natural as possible. Before, after. Before and after. You want to be checking this. You want to be zooming in, zooming out a lot to see what needs to be retouched, but then zoom out to check it, to make sure it looks natural. Zoom in. So I think I'm at the point where I might want to duplicate my working image and blur out my background. So I will right click on it, I'm going to duplicate my layer, and I'm going to call it blur effect. Okay? And this you'll notice on the directions that there are a couple different ideas. You can do blur effect with a Gaussian blur, or you can do a surface blur, or you can do a motion blur. You have 3 options. You want to pick one of these options, okay? Just one of them. Don't try to do multiple options. So I'm thinking I'm going to just do a Gaussian blur. So I'm going to go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm asking you to adjust the radius to 40. So we're going to, yes, we are going to make this look very, very soft. Now, that's not happening to my layer 1, so I'm going to put my layer 1 underneath my blur effect. Okay, so my layer 1 needs to be merged. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete my blur effect. Okay, my layer 1 and my working image needs to be merged. Okay, so I'm going to select my layer 1, and I'm going to select my working image, and I'm going to merge those layers. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to make sure that that square shape that I added blends in properly. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to Alt, and I'm going to just go around the edges and blend in that square shape to make sure it blends in properly a little bit along the edges. Okay, so now I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'm going to call it blur effect. And now I can go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to make this a 40. We're going to really blur this out. Okay? Now, this is not how this is going to stay. Alright? What we're going to do now is we're going to adjust the opacity down to the point of what we're looking for is the fabric. We're looking at the fabric. We want the fabric to be completely soft. Okay, so we are going to adjust the opacity so that the fabric is soft in the background and the wrinkles are not noticeable. Okay, I'm now going to add a layer mask. Here's our layer mask. It's the little square with the little black circle in the middle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the blur effects off of my objects. But I want my blur to be mostly blurry in the background and not blurry in the front at all. So I'm going to use my gradient tool over here. I'm going to come over here and use my gradient tool. And I'm going to set my gradient tool to an opacity, a lower opacity. So I'm going to bring that down to about 50%. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this across so that I engage my layer mask. And what's going to happen is the bottom part's going to stay sharper and the background's going to stay soft. So let's hope this is the right direction. Okay, that was the wrong direction, so I'm going to edit undo. I actually need to go from top to bottom, and you'll notice now that the background is still soft, but the front is sharper. Okay, so now I'm going to use my brush tool, and I'm going to make sure my brush tool is somewhat larger, and I'm going to go and I'm going to remove the soft focus off of my objects. Okay, so my objects start to look like a black silhouette on my layer mask. Okay, so my objects start to look like a black silhouette in my layer mask right over here. So I'm taking off the soft focus off of my objects. We want our objects to be sharp. We want the background to be blurry and out of focus. We want our objects to be sharp. And then the front can be a little soft, you know. That looks nice. Having it slightly, the fabric here in front is slightly soft. Okay. Okay, so you should see that our layer mask is starting to look like. Now be very careful going around the edges of your objects. You don't want to take the blur off of the background. We want that background to be nice and soft. So I'm going to be very careful going around the edges of my object here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put the video on pause for a second. Okay, so I put on pause for a little bit just so I could go in and do all the work, and you don't have to like see all the work being done, but you can see the final results. So here is before the blur effect. Okay, so we duplicated layer 1, which is our working image. And then we added the blur by adding the Gaussian blur at 40%, which was super blurry. And then we put in the layer mask, and we used the gradient tool over here and dragged that from top to bottom. And then we went in and used our brush tool and continued to remove the soft effect from our objects, but leaving it a little bit soft on our fabric in the front, but then becoming increasingly out of focus in the back. And what that does is it creates what's called a depth of fill. Okay, so our depth of fill, and making it look like our background's out of focus. Now our final step is to add a vignette. So we'll come over here and we'll add our solid color vignette, and I'm going to do a black. We're going to go ahead and engage our layer mask again. We're going to make sure we've got our brush tool here. We're going to set that to like 2500. Alright, about 2500. We can just type that in. So we lay that there. We can see that it fits the space pretty well. And then we got a black over white, and we're going to start to click in here. Now we want a nice rounded vignette. We want the corners of our image to be dark. And we look over here. We have a nice rounded vignette with a little bit of white on the edges. Okay. And if we turn this off, we can see the difference here. That looks really nice, having those little dark edges there. Helps to kind of hide the fabric wrinkles a little bit. Adds a nice little finishing touch to it. And that's pretty much done. We're ready to turn this image in.